Well, hi everyone. We are here with another webinar. Today we have Pascal Precht talking about the new ngModule. Before we go into the topic, I'd like to introduce Wasim, our co-host.
As usual.
Hi,
guys.
Hi, Wasim.
Hi, Gerard. Hi, Pascal.
Hey,
How are you doing?
Awesome. Thanks. And you?
Yeah, very good, very good.
Nice.
You're wearing the hat, the lucky hat again.
Yeah, that's my lucky hat, man.
So it's working great.
So,
okay, so let's jump into the topic. Today we welcome Pascal. Hi, Pascal.
Hello. I don't have my lucky hat on. This is the unlucky hat.
your usual hat.
This is the you have to talk about a topic you don't know anything about hat.
Yeah, very good. So you want to do a brief introduction of yourself. We all know you, but just for the people that maybe the one or two people that doesn't know you.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, hi. My name is Pascal, and I'm from Germany, and yeah, I'm a developer, and I do a lot of Angular. Every now and then, I do trainings on Angular with some friends, and travel the world and write articles on Angular. You probably, maybe one of you out there like ran into an article on the ThoughtRam blog, and yeah, I'm kind of involved in that, and yeah, I think that's it. I don't know. I don't think there's anything else.
Well, we all have read some of your articles and follow. I think you are doing a new training in New York. I saw some announcement.
Right. Yeah, I totally forgot that.
Really excited about it, I guess.
Yeah, Angular 2 masterclass in New York City. It's the first time we're actually doing like a 3-day public training. So it's going to be very cool. And today we actually announced the venue. We settled on a venue, and I think it's going to be very cool.
Yeah, I'm sure. So yeah, what can you tell us about the ngModule, the new ngModule?
Right, so ngModule. So ngModule is a feature that has been introduced in the release candidate number 5 of Angular 2, which is it's like pretty far in the past, probably like 1 or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
No, it's a bit longer, but yeah. So it's like basically a new kind of like a module system, an Angular specific module system, which allows us to like put some functionality into like certain blocks that we can then reuse and compile and lazy load and these kind of things. And yeah, there are a couple of cool things about it. It actually so for people that are new to Angular 2. For those, I think it's the easiest, for them it's the easiest scenario to actually learn about them, because they probably learn about ngModule and then they just take it as it is and it just makes sense, right? But if you're using Angular 2 since a longer time, where ngModule did not exist, it's a bit harder to get the idea behind it in the first place. But it turns out it's a cool thing. It allows very, very cool things like declaring components and directives for a certain part of your application, and making them available to other parts of your application, or keeping them private, depending on what you want to do. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, I think one just has to take a look at them.
Probably gives you more control.
Yeah, and it also it kind of reduces the amount of code that you have to write. There was a time, for those who don't know, there was a time where we had to define directive dependencies on every component
Yeah, I remember that.
Right? Like all components or directives or pipes that you used in a component, they had to be defined on that component so that Angular can find out what's actually needed.
Yeah, true.
This
So
is gone.
for example, when I did the migration for some of my my blog post, I spent a lot of time removing things, so it makes the code
Right.
much shorter.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
good.
Yeah, at least when you have a lot of components that have a lot of dependencies on other components and things. So yeah, I think it's good. And yeah, I don't know. We can probably just start and take a look at some code. What do you think?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, so then I'm gonna share my screen right now. You should see my screen now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then, so I've prepared something. Like I've prepared a little repository with some demos to like show you around
Cool.
what ngModule looks like, right? So so I have some notes, and the first thing I want to talk about is so we heard about ngModule now as a thing. I think it's also important to realize that ngModules is not just something that we use as a consumer of the framework, but also Angular itself has or uses ngModules for its own features. Like there's a forms module, there's an HTTP module, there's a router module. So depending on what features you need and you want to use, you probably want to use, or you probably get an ngModule for that from Angular. And then also third-party libraries will introduce their own modules, right? So there's material design, an implementation in Angular 2 that will come, or that comes actually with its own ngModule. There's Angular Fire, there's Ionic, and I'm sure there are going to be like a lot of other third-party Angular libraries and features that will introduce their own ngModules so that you can use them in your application in a very easy way. So I think we can just start off with something now. So I have this repository here. It's like a sample app, and it's basically scarfolded using Angular CLI. And if I run ngzerf, it's pretty straightforward. You can just, so for those who don't know, when you create a project using Angular CLI, it basically installs all the dependencies for you. It like scaffolds an application structure, and then all you need to do is that to like run ngzerf, which is what I'm doing right now, and then it will like transpile all your code and bundle everything. So there's like a lot of stuff going on there. Angular CLI does actually a very good job in optimizing your code, and you probably want to take a look at that.
Shout out to the Angular CLI team.
Definitely. Yeah. Shout out to Angular CLI and to everyone who's actually helping out on that.
Webpack team also.
Yes. So once you've like started your Angular application from Angular CLI, it spins up a web server on localhost 4200, and I can start like that, and then you see there's the application, right? Hello, Angular Zone. So now let's take a look at some code. So there's a file called like in source app module ts, right? So this is basically our entry point of the application. So what we see here is an ngModule, which is a decorator, and a decorator is something that you can put on a class, which we have here as well, right? So there's app module. So this is our application module. This is the thing that we want to bootstrap when we run our application. So there are a couple of things going on here. So first of all, ngModule is something that we can import from Angular core, right? So it's a core decorator feature, basically. And then there is this declarations property, which I'll get into in a minute. And then there's imports, and there's bootstrap. So bootstrap is the property that says which component that is defined in this module is the one that we want to bootstrap when this app is run, right? Yeah. So in our case, it's app component, and it's also in declarations, because what we need to do is all components and directives and pipes have to, like the ones that we build ourselves, they have to belong to at least one ngModule. So if we create an app component that we want to bootstrap, then this app component has to be part of our app module. There's no other way. So, and everything, like all components that you create as a developer, as a consumer of the framework, you have to add your components and pipes and directives to the declarations property of your module, so that the module knows what comes with it. And Bootstrap really just says which of these components need to be bootstrapped. And then there's
this file will be like a really good place, to have an overview of how, the application, what are the dependencies, what are the, the
right, exactly. It is one good place.
Cool.
Yeah, because what you also see here is that there's this imports property where there's a browser module imported, and I'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, you see here that this module, it has an app component, it needs a browser module, and it bootstraps the app component. And a module itself needs to be bootstrapped as well, right? So there's a file and source and then main.ts, and there we can actually see how the module itself is bootstrapped. So this line right here, this is the important one. So there's a function called platform browser dynamic, and this one creates a platform for us. And the platform is basically and we can see it as an environment where our application needs to run. So the cool thing about Angular 2 is you can run your applications in the browser. You can run your application in the browser, but compile your application offline first. Or you can run them in a web worker or on a server. It really doesn't matter. You can basically run your Angular application pretty much everywhere. And depending on where you want to run your application, you want to create a different platform, because a platform creates some certain things that you need to make them run in the platform. And so platform browser dynamic is really just a thing that creates a platform where you can bootstrap a module that is able to run in the browser. And this is pretty much what we're doing here. There's like some other things going on here that Angular CLI does for us, but we won't talk about that right now. So this is really the important part. We import this platform function. It returns a platform reference. And this one has a function bootstrap module, which takes our module. And the module is imported right here, which is the one that is defined up here.
So, sorry, Pascal. So probably a good example would be when you use Angular Universal. That will change the platform?
Correct, yeah. If you run your application using Angular Universal, so the server-side solution for Angular, you would probably do something like platform universal, and then probably even dynamic dot bootstrap module or something, right? So this should be the only place that you would need to change if you want to run your app in a different environment.
Yeah, that's kind of mind-blowing, because we are used to think on web alone, and now when you open, you open this Angular Universal, and you can start rendering the same application in different environments. It's kind of like, wow.
Yeah, I think it's cool too, and the Angular team has put a lot of work and research into this, like to make it good. And yeah, I think it's pretty good. So awesome. Yeah, let's take a look at app component to see what's actually going on there, right? So because that's the one that is bootstrapped. App component we can find in source app.component.ts, and it's really just a hello world component, right? Angular CLI bootstrapped it for me. It has a selector, a template, some CSS, and there's a title property. So now if we take a look at the template of that component, which is app component HTML, there's really just this headline, and it interpolates a title, which is the thing that we defined here in the component. So, and that's why we see hello Angular zone right here. I think that's pretty clear. Okay, so now let's take a look at another step, right? So we now see so we have seen how we define an ngModule and how to bootstrap it. Now the next thing we want to do is we actually want to use like some components that we've defined in our component, right? So we have seen that we declared an app component, and declarations are really just the thing that we define to, like, those are the things that we use in our module. Yeah. Let's say we want to add another component to our module, right? So we now jump into the next step. So what we do is let me see where I have like all these different tabs here. I'm going to do it here. So I'm going to check out my demo 2. So, and this one will show you how, like what it looks like if you would create another component that you want to use that maybe also has some dependencies, right? So when we take a look at the browser here, you see that we again see a Hello Angular zone, and then there is a list of contacts. So let's see what's going on here. Our app module now has another component declared called context list component. And then there's another property providers because we also have a context service in this scenario, which basically fetches contacts for us. Okay, so context list component is defined here. So we import it from a from context list, which is a folder in our file structure. So if we go to source app context list, there's a context list component TS file, and this one actually really just takes an input of contacts and then renders a list of contacts using ngFor. So let's see where this component is actually used. This component is used in our app component that we've seen earlier. So this component here now does some more work. There's not just a title, it also has a context service dependency, which we will see in a second. And it says when it's initialized, we get the context and assign that to a context property. And if we take a look at the template, we see that this one pretty much really just uses the context list component and assigns the context that it fetches from the service to that component.
Yeah, using the input that you
right, using input property bindings.
Cool.
So again, this is our root component. It has a service that fetches contacts. Those contacts are then passed to a context list component, and the context list component we see here is really just a component that takes contacts and renders a list based on them. Okay, if we take a look at the context service, there's nothing special going on here really. It's just a class that has this method get contacts, and it returns a list of contacts. We see contacts is imported up here. If we take a look at the context file from where we import things, it's really just a list of contacts. It's just that. Nothing special going on here. The interesting part here, though, is that our app module now has like an additional declaration. So what we have here is a list of declarables. We call them declarables. And declarables are really like components, directives, or pipes. Everything that is used inside the component has to be declared or imported. Right. We import browser module because that thing makes sure that our module runs in the browser. And it also comes with some other cool features like core directives, ngFor and ngIf. So the reason that we can use ngFor to generate this list is actually because browser module is imported. Because browser module imports another module called common module, and that actually has the ngFor and ngIf directives.
Hey, Pascal.
Yeah.
Can you just remove it and see what happens?
You mean the browser module import?
Yeah,
sure, I can remove it.
Shows the error message.
Let's see what it says. So it's recompiling. And then we get an error, and it says that it somewhere in our application it can't bind ngFor off since it isn't a known property of li. So what that means is that if we take a look at our context list component, this is actually the wrong template. It's right here. So here in the template, we use ngFor to generate the list. And this thing actually is a directive that sets up a property binding internally. So now that we did not import or that we removed the browser module, there is no ngFor directive available to our application anymore. And so basically what this means is we kind of try to bind to a property on this element, the li element, which is actually not a DOM property of the li element. Like there's no DOM property called ngFor off on the list item element, right? And so it doesn't know that thing, and that's why we get an error. As soon as the directive is available, this error is gone.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So let me add that back in. Okay, cool. So now we added like a new component. We can use it. We also added a provider for our context service. So now all of our components in our module can use or can ask for an instance of that service, right? We declared them basically for the root injector of our application. Okay, so now what we want to do is, let's get back to the notes. Right, so there's this thing called root modules and feature modules. So one thing that I didn't mention is that this root module is basically the root module of our application, and there's usually just one root module in our app. Like in every Angular app that you build, there's usually one root app module. And all other modules, like for example, the browser module, and others like HTTP modules and probably also modules that you build yourself are so-called feature modules, right? And we have to kind of distinguish between those modules. So a feature module can have like directives and like declarations and imports and providers and things like that as well. But they have some, you know, they kind of affect the way how we probably inject things. So well,
Okay.
let's just go back to our next demo and see what we do there. Right. So now what we do is in this app. So this is the same app now. It's just I did something. Like I added something new to it. So this app actually now fetches the contact data from a remote server, and you see there's an error right here because this API URL here is not available. This is because I didn't start my my server.
Yeah.
So I can do that really quick by going back to some other material actually. npm run REST API. Okay, so this now started a simple REST API server on my machine. If I reload, reload the browser, you'll see we'll get a different list of contacts. There's another error that we cannot find Angular HTTP. This is a bug in Angular CLI, so it's not very good in like rebuilding your app when you check out different states using Git. So it somehow confuses things, and then it thinks certain modules are not available, which is actually not true. So I'm going to rerun the build process right now, and then the error here should be gone.
I think it's because the live reload. Yeah.
Okay. So now, if we take a look at our app module, the only thing that changed here is that we now imported a new module called HTTP module, which is a module that adds HTTP capabilities to an application. So we have to import it to our application module as well, because what we want to do is we want to use the HTTP service in our context service. And in order to use it, we first need to add a provider for that service. And the provider is defined in this module. So we actually don't have to care about the provider at all. All we do is we add the HTTP module to our imports, and that will do like all the work for us. And from this point on,
that's bringing all the components and directives like all in a bag, kind of.
Right. So when you import like an ng module, you will get all of their providers plus all the declarables that are exported from that module. Okay. So there's basically another property called exports, which allows you to export things from your module in case your module is imported somewhere else.
Like you can cherry pick what you want to expose.
Yes, that's pretty powerful actually, because you can decide like, you know, what things are declared in your module, but you can also decide what things are available to other modules that import your module. You probably don't want to expose all of your components for whatever reason to other applications. So you can export them explicitly.
Yeah, really interesting.
So now if we take a look at the context service, this one is a bit different now. Instead of just returning contacts, it gets a HTTP service dependency, and fetches the context from the remote server and then gets the items, right? So there's nothing special going on here. And then that's why we get this list now. So this is what we get from the API server.
Cool.
Actually, that's actually the only change in this case. And the interesting part is really that our app module now imports another module, and we're using we're injecting a service from a provider that is provided by this additional module.
So that's the only thing we added to use the HTTP module, isn't it?
Correct, yes. In fact, if we take a look at the source code, this is the only thing that it really exports. So if we, so this is the Angular 2 source code. Let me go to the right package real quick. So there's a source HTTP module file in here. So this is the source code of the HTTP module, and it's actually this one. So nice. You see here, this is Angular 2 source code. And all it does, it uses the exact same tools that we use. So there is nothing special going on there. Angular uses the same APIs that you use. So that makes it very easy to understand, right? So this thing here is an HTTP module, and all it does, it just defines a set of providers. And those providers will be added to our application injector when we import this module. You see, in order to make this HTTP service work, there's a lot more stuff going on, but you don't have to care about that. All you do is you import the HTTP module, and then you can just do your work.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just Pascal, I can see there's a comment to do for you.
Right, yeah, that's because I've done some things in the past here, but I don't think this is what we want to focus on today.
That's okay.
And another interesting thing that we see here is that there's another module for JSON-P, for example, right? So this is another ng module. It has a different set of provider configuration because it performs requests using a JSON-P backend instead of an HTTP backend.
Yeah,
okay.
So we can choose these two modules.
Right, or you can even probably use both. It depends on what you want to do, right?
Okay.
Okay, so getting back to our application. So this is cool. We can do that. Let's take a look at another, what do we have in my notes here? But I think now we're actually getting to actual feature models. Oh, another thing that I wanted to do was, let's see. So let's actually take a look at the browser module. So if we go to in the Angular source code again, there's the platform browser code, and there's a browser and source. I think there is a browser TS file right here. So this one again has its own ng module. That's the one that we are importing, right? You see again there is like a lot of stuff going on that it does for us. And the interesting part here, it exports two other modules, right? There's the common module and there's the application module. And if you dig further, you will see that these two modules are also just ng modules. And a common module is the thing that actually has ngIf and ngFor, right? It's quite interesting because if you create another feature module, which we'll do in a second, you'll see that this one will not depend on the browser module. It will depend on the common module because we only want to use the browser module on our root application and our root module. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Let's do, this is actually the wrong folder. So let me do it here. Okay, so we go and check out demo 4. So this one introduces a feature module in our application. So if I open that app, so now we had a context list component, right? So now what we've done is we created a feature module which comes with the context service and the context list component. So instead of doing that in our application module, we now have a feature module called contact module right here. And this one comes with everything we need to get this list of contacts here. So we import it here, and now if we take a look at our app component, and I'll open it up right here, app component TS, we'll see this one still fetches the contacts, and if we take a look at the template of the app component, we'll see that this one still just renders. So it still renders the context list, And if we take a look at the contact module right here, contact module. So this one actually declares the context list component. So I'm going to open up the app module next to it so you can see the difference. So you see there is no no context list module, context list component declared in our application module anymore, right? Instead, it is declared in our feature module, which also exports it, and we import the contact module here, and that's the reason why we can use the context list component in our app. So if I would remove the exports here, right, we will actually get an error that either we will get an error or we just don't see anything. Let me just reload here. Right, so we'll get an error that we cannot bind contacts to context list, because context list now is a DOM element which doesn't have a property context. And that's simply because our application module at this point doesn't know anything about the context list component. It is declared in the contact module, and the contact module is imported, but it's the component itself is not exported from that module. So you see, it can be that you might have scenarios where you don't want to export everything. Right, so I'm going to bring that back in.
You actually refactor the context module in a way that we can also remove the provider, or you did also that, isn't it?
Well, right. So one thing I need to get rid of here is the HTTP module. You haven't seen that. Okay. So so the providers is another thing. So again, ngModule has their its own providers, right? And before we've checked out this scenario, we had the providers defined down here in our application module.
Yeah.
So now, since we've introduced a feature module for contacts, the contact service obviously belongs into this one. So that's why I moved it in there too, right? And now that module comes with the providers. And it's pretty much the same way we've seen with the HTTP module, where the HTTP module introduces all the providers. But now we don't have to care about that. We just import the contact module. In fact, all the providers that are defined in feature modules will be added to our root injector, to our application root injector. So that means from the point on we import that module, we can inject an instance of contact service everywhere in our application.
So Pascal,
that's really nice. That's really nice.
I have a question about the common module.
Yes.
Do you need to import it in your contact module?
That's a very good question. In fact, this one, yes, we do need the common module here, because let me get rid of the app module very quick. So as I showed earlier, the common module exports things like ngIf and ngFor, so Angular's core directives, right?
Right.
And if we take a look at our context list component, which is now in source app contact. So there's a new folder contact for that module. And here we have the context list component right there.
Oops.
Here. So this component here uses ngFor. Right. So in order to use it, we need to import the common module. We haven't done this in our root application module because we have imported the browser module, which also re-exports the common module, as we've seen right here. Right, so this is the browser module, Angular 2 source code. We see you can actually re-export entire applications, not just declarables.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay.
But your contact module get injected into the app module.
That's correct.
And your app module imports the browser, so it should.
Yeah, I could just remove it here because the common module is already available via the browser module. But again, maybe this module here isn't even loaded in some other scenario, and then so this really just makes sure that that everything is in place. It gets especially interesting when you lazy load this module here.
Sure.
Right.
Which we will do in another scenario. Okay, another interesting fact, if we take a look at our app components, our root component, this one, actually, it still simply asks for the contact service and uses that, even though there's no provider defined in our ngModule, because we imported that from the contact module. Okay, let me get to the next step, demo 5. So demo 5 introduces basically the feature module, the same way we had it before, but now it is added via routes. So it is now a module that we can route to. So,
okay.
Or actually, it's the only thing that really the only thing that really differs in this case is that we added routing to our application, which is like the first step we want to do so that we can implement lazy loading later on. So what we see here is, again, our application module. We have the browser module dependency, we have the HTTP module dependency. There's the contact module because, well, we want to use things from our contact module. And then there is a new module here, the router module. And this one we imported from @AngularRouter. And the router module, again, is really just yet another ngModule, which adds routing capabilities to our application. There's one special thing here, which is this for root method. And this is a convention for ngModules that have providers that should be added to our root application. So again, we actually learned that all feature modules that we add to our application modules, all the providers of those feature modules will be added to our root injector. But when it comes to routing, we actually have two different scenarios. We just don't add the router module. We have to add application routes so that our router knows what our routes look like. And those routes we can add either to a root module, which is our app module right here, or we can also lazy load modules which come with their own routes. And in that case, we will actually, and that we will see in a second, we will actually need the for child method. So there's a difference in providing services for the root module and for child modules.
Yeah, this is also an interesting example of how you can pass configuration into modules. But that's correct. That's for another webinar.
Yeah, right.
That's cool.
So what we do here is we add routing. We pass in our routes, and our routes are imported from here. It's app.routes, and if we open up the file, we'll actually see that it's really just a single route that we've defined with a path, with an empty path. So this is basically saying, okay, whenever someone comes to our application, we will redirect to the contacts route. And you'll see that there, or actually we see it right now, there's no route configuration for contacts here. And this is because that configuration for this context-specific part of our application is defined in our contact module. So
nice.
If we go to source app contact, and then there's a new file called contact routes.ts, we'll see this one actually has contact routes. So it's, again, yet another list of routes. And this one has a path for contacts. And we actually see it here on the right-hand side. Our application points to contacts. I can, even if I go back to root, it will redirect us to contacts, because that's what our root route configuration says, right?
That's really cool. So you're actually delegating the definition of the routes to the module.
Correct, because that's where they belong to, right? And the cool thing is the whole module, our whole contact module, can also be lazy loaded, and the routes just come with them, right? You don't have to care about that, which is pretty cool. So now we see that the entry point of our contact module is the contacts dashboard component. And that's just a new component that will render the list component. That's why you see the same output here. It doesn't do anything special. We can take a look at source app contact, and then there's contacts dashboard component. This one, you'll see this one actually now fetches the contact data instead of our root component. And I'll open up the root component up here. so app component TS, it doesn't do the work anymore of fetching the context. So actually, it doesn't really care about context at all anymore, which is pretty cool because now we have it in a different module here in our context dashboard component, and this one is now responsible of also fetching the context.
Yeah, I think that's a really good feature.
And then in the template of this dashboard component, we'll see that this one now renders the list. So everything that we've done in the root component, we now do in our feature module. But we now also route to it so that our root application or our root application or our module doesn't know anything about the context anymore, which I think is pretty cool. Another thing that is interesting, if we take a look at our contact module, which is the feature module, so this one now declares the context list component, it exports the context list component, and it actually, this is the actual new version, sorry. So it also declares the context dashboard component because that's the one that we use right here. It has the common module, and you see here now it has a router module as well because it defines routes for this child module.
I see.
Right? So this is the difference between this child module and our root module. This here calls router module for root, and this one calls router module for child. So there's a different way of how the router module sets up services and everything, depending on what kind of module we want to provide routes for.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this actually brings me to the last demo, I think.
Yeah, very good.
Let me see. Oops, typing is hard sometimes. Is it here? It's here. So, so this is demo 5. And demo 6, sorry.
Demo 6, yeah.
So demo 6 is a bit special. I hope, once it's recompiling. So, right, so you'll see that here we now have links, right? And if I scroll down here and go to elements and inspect a link here, let me scroll it down. You'll see that every component actually now links to slash contact slash and then some ID, right? So now if we take a look at our context module.
So we have some nested roots then.
Well, yeah, not only that, we actually
Lazy loading?
We lazy load it, yeah.
Oh,
like
yes.
when I click on a contact, it will actually lazy load another module that introduces a contact detail component.
Oh, Jesus.
Let's take a look at the code first. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. So if we take a look at our contact dashboard first. So the dashboard component right here. Again, this one actually hasn't changed. It just simply fetches the context for us. It has a template in which we context list, right? But if we take a look at the context list, which is also part of our contact module, so this component now has a router link added to our list, right?
Okay.
So again, we generate a list, and then for each list item, we generate a link using router link, which also generates the href for us. And we say here that we want to link to /contact/some ID. Okay, right. So let's take a look at the route configuration for that route that we want to route to. So we go to the context module, and then there's contact routes, and this one looks a bit special now. So it has another route now for contact/ID, and this one loads children. And loading children means basically we're lazy loading an additional ngModule, which again comes with its own routes, with its own components, with its own services and everything else. And we see here we have a new ngModule called contact detail.
Nice.
I know it's probably not the best use case for it. You probably do that for other types of components, but I was running out of time, so I just made it for the contact detail. So there's a new module, contact detail, and it has, well, let's just take a look at it. So in source app contact detail, we have a contact detail module file. And we see it's just yet another ngModule, and it has its own declarations. It comes with a contact detail view component, and that's the one that we see when we actually click on a component. Let me just do it real quick. Boom. Oh, we get an error.
Oh.
Can't find module. Ooh, that's not cool.
So the pass or something.
Let me see. Just to make sure.
Okay, let's see the path.
I'll rerun it.
Probably it's details, or
well,
I do that error all the time.
Well, actually, Pascal, last time I tried to do lazy loading with modules using the current version of the CLI. It didn't work.
It didn't work. Well, it worked for me like before this call. So let me see. Now I see it works. So I needed to rerun the Angular CLI. Sometimes Webpack doesn't seem to pick up things correctly. So then it needs to be.
Yeah, it seems the same problem. So it's the live reloading. It's just not picking up this Git
right
out.
So right. So you can see like I can click on a contact and I can go back to the list. Right, just like that.
Cool.
Okay, so that works. So let's see. We've seen the route configuration that takes us to the contact detail module, and the contact detail module is really just that file. I'm gonna open up the route configuration for our contact module again because there's something special in there. Right here. So here, where we say load children, we see that this is not a component type anymore, but instead it's a string because we don't have the component type that we wanna load because, well, it's not there yet. We want to lazy load it. So in Angular 2, you say load children, and you give a path to a module, which in our case is contact detail, and then we have the module file, and then there's this hash symbol, and then you actually declare the module that is defined in that file that you wanna load. So that's why we have this syntax, because you can have multiple ngModules in a file, and that's why you specify here which module you actually want to load. And contact detail module is the one that we have exported here.
I found, I was doing, migrating some of my blog posts. I found that you can use export default and then remove the hashtag.
Right, that's another alternative. So instead of using the hash in your route configuration, you can also export a default here, and then it will just take that. So there are two ways to handle that.
That's another trick. Yeah.
Right. And so this contact detail module, again, it declares a contact detail view component. It imports the common module, which it probably don't really need, so we can probably just get rid of that. Technically, it doesn't need it really. And it also comes with its own routes. So if we take a look at source app contact detail module and then the contact detail routes, we'll see that this one comes with one route, and you see, again, it's an empty path. And it's an empty path because, well, it is a lazy loaded module that will just extend the route configuration of our root module. And if we take a look at the contact routes again, so we see that the contact routes, they specify, hey, I want to route to contact / and then some ID. It's actually another cool thing of Angular 2. You can actually route to components that are not there yet. You can link to components that are not there yet. That's what I want to say. You can link to components that are not even physically loaded from the server yet. So
yeah,
here,
that's crazy.
Right, and this is why we can just say, okay, we are already in the path where we want to be, right? We want to be in /contact /ID, which we are in right here. And so that is the entry point of our module. And that's why we can just stick with path, like with an empty path here.
Kind of the default.
Yeah, it's kind of the default entry point of our module here. And again, we can also do redirect here if we want to get to another component or whatever. And
yeah, that's cool.
So can you load multiple modules at once?
What do you mean by that?
Like load children, and you want to specify the URL of the model?
Oh, I see. So well, so what can happen is you can actually have in your lazy loaded module that comes with its own routes, you can have like another path like, you know, foo, for example, and it can have, of course, its own children that it loads, right? It can have its own children routes.
Yeah, so you can't load them all at once.
If you right, so if your entry path here, let's say this one doesn't load the context detail view component, but instead it would redirect to, let's say, foo, then yeah, and this one could load children at that point. Yeah.
Okay.
So then you would basically load multiple things at the same time. I'm not sure if nested lazy loaded modules work. I would say yes. And actually, Shai Resnick, I think he ran into an issue with that recently. Also, while I'm mentioning him, big shout out to Shai Resnick, because he spent some time with me discussing ngModules and helping me out, getting a better understanding and sharing his insights, because he spent a lot of time with them as well. And yeah, so all of this that you're seeing right now is actually also due to the help of him and the great docs and everything.
Cool.
Shy.
Right, Shy. Oh no, panic.
This is Shy.
So maybe let's just take like one last look at the contact detail module, where we actually load the contact detail view component. So there's a contact detail view component, and this one is right here. So this component now actually, this is the one that we see here right now. This is the thing that renders that single contact thing. You know, you see here, this one actually, this is something that is not too nice, something that I could have built better. So you see that the contact detail view component, the one that is actually loaded lazily, it has a dependency on the contact service, which is a service that is provided in our root module.
Yeah.
And I'm using the type here to actually get the dependency, and the type is actually defined in a different module. So you see I'm importing the type from the contact module. And that is actually not super nice, because now we have like a hard-coded dependency against this other module. So it would actually be nicer in this case to actually have a shared ngModule where we would expose the contact service. And this shared module would be imported by the contact module and the contact detail view module.
Yeah.
So
Sure. Yeah.
that's something that can definitely be refactored. So this is definitely not a best practice here. And so yeah, it takes the router parameter, which we have up here, like the 1 or the 2 or the 3 or whatever, and fetches the contact based on that. And then that's why we get the name rendered here. If we take a look at the template of that component, we see it really just renders the name of the contact that it has, and it links back to the list. There's really no rocket science going on here. The really interesting part is really just the lazy loading of the ngModule in this case.
All right.
Right. I think that's all the demos that I have. There's one last thing I want to say. So for those who are interested in diving deeper, so there's a great chapter on ngModules in the Angular docs. There's you see a table of contents. There are like many topics covered here, like even like resolving conflicts and feature modules, lazy loading, shared modules. So the stuff that I've been talking about like a minute ago, that's actually covered here, and I definitely recommend checking that out. And also shout out to the Angular docs team who has written this whole huge thing here.
Yeah,
and
great job.
There's another documentation part that you should definitely check out. It really helped me understanding edge cases with ngModules, and that's the FAQ section for Angular modules.
Okay.
So here you have like very interesting questions, like very common questions, but also edge case questions that you probably don't have an answer for when you get them asked like right away. So definitely check those out. Those are very interesting and helpful bits in there. So this was like pure gold for me. So yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking about questions, I have one for you from the chat room.
Okay.
If you want to use the NGRX module, how would you use it with this new model stuff?
Okay, so I'm not familiar, like not super familiar with ngrx, but technically it should be like this. So you would go into your root module, which is this one here. There would be probably, or ideally, there would be a module, let's call it ngrx module, which is another ng module provided by ngrx. So you would probably import that from at ngrx store or whatever. Let's call it store module. I don't know if it's actually there, but that's how I would assume it should work. And then you would probably do something like this. You would import it here, and then you would probably provide a store or something. I could imagine that
that makes sense. Yeah.
So we can reuse the exact same approach.
Yeah, so that's actually the whole idea, right? That we are all using the same APIs. Like the Angular itself uses the same APIs. You will use the same APIs, and also third-party modules like ngrx or Angular Material or Ionic. They will all use the same APIs.
Yeah, I think once you get used to it, and we have seen a few examples already. I think it's pretty straightforward. With some edge cases, of course.
I think so. I think so too. I think like one of the nice things is actually that you can like explicitly say what is defined in your module, and also what you want to expose to the outside world. And another thing that we actually haven't talked about, and I don't think we have time for that, but this ng module construct actually enables offline compilation of our application.
Okay.
So there's another property called entry components here, which you will rarely see when you build something not too sophisticated yourself. But ngModule is actually the key to having a single code base for the different environments you want to run and compile your applications in. So that's pretty cool, actually.
So it's enabling these scenarios. Cool.
It is. It makes that scenario at least like nicer. It was kind of possible before, not all of the scenarios, but ngModule basically fulfills all of the scenarios and covers them and makes them very nicely. So I think it's pretty cool because it really allows to have a single code base no matter what scenario or environment you want to run your application.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. So I don't know if you have any other questions, Wasim, maybe from the chat or yourself, or
one from the chat.
We can wrap up.
Can you just like really quickly explain again how the declarations and the providers get merged inside a model?
Oh yeah. So first of all, the declarations. So you have a root module, and a root module can come with its own providers, right? So you would define some providers here. So, and then what this will do, it will basically, let me just draw it down here. It will create let's call it the root injector. And the root injector then would have like a provider for this thing called foo service. And then at that point, all of your components in your application can ask for a service of that type. Now, if you import another module, for example, the HTTP module, which comes with its own providers, for example, a provider for the HTTP module service, then this one will be added to your root injector like this, right? So you will now have the HTTP service available for an entire application. This, unfortunately, is not true for lazy loaded modules. When you lazy load a module, you'll actually get a child injector for that module, which will have its own service. In our case, for example, it could be a contact service. But this one, so let me draw a line here. This one would be a lazy module, and this one here is our, so this one here is our root module. Right, it's the root application module. So this one, so you can actually, inside this lazy module, when you have components here, those components can still ask for dependencies that are provided via those injectors, via this root injector, right? So that's totally possible. Like I can ask for a foo service here as well. But here, I will not be able to ask for a contact service. So this one doesn't work.
I assume.
So this is for providers, and what about declarations and components?
Right, so declarations are kind of merged on the root level as well, and in order to like make them like available in your application, like when you import a contact module, for example, which we do right here, which comes with its own declarations, those need to be exported by that module. So if I open up that module again right here, let me do it here. So you see. So this one actually, it doesn't export anything anymore because the context list component is only used inside that context module. But if I want to use the context list component inside my root module again, I would need to export it here. And then I can say context list component, this one. And from that point on, so here it is exported. This is the one thing that is exported. Providers are basically merged automatically from feature modules, not from lazy loaded modules, right? The lazy loaded modules get their child injector. So that happens automatically, but for declarations, you need to explicitly export them. And then when you import that module, you can use them.
Yep.
So that's probably the case for Angular material and all of these libraries that they
Actually, if you take a look at the Angular Material 2 source code, you will see that there are many modules. There are modules for almost every component, like the MD button and MD tabs and everything. In case you're just interested in one single feature, that can happen. Or you can also import a Angular Material module, which kind of re-exports all of the other component modules. So it's the same thing going on there, just for more things.
Cool. Well, I think we have to wrap up. So, well, thank you very much, Pascal. I think you did a great job. We have even seen some of the Angular core code, which is a little bit scary for some people. So that was cool. And then you also cover lazy loading and all the common scenarios, like really quick. So I wouldn't interrupt you. So we did a little bit.
Thank you, Pascal.
Longer webinar, but that's completely fine.
Oh man, I hope you could have totally interrupted me and I would have stopped talking.
No,
it's okay. It's recorded, so no big deal.
Not a chance. So
I mean, you can always ask questions on Twitter if you want to. And there are actually like many people you can ask. Like there are like many Angular GDEs you can ask. So you don't have to reach out just to me. You can also reach out to Gerard or Wasim or Shai or Max. There are like so many Angular GDEs that you can ask. But yeah, like feel free to just reach out and ask your questions in case there's still something unclear. And I mean, that was all very fast and very quick. I tried to cover as much as possible so that you can see all the cool things.
No, you covered a lot.
But you can also always check out the documentation. It will give you a better understanding of that. Probably way better than I could explain to you in like a podcast like this.
Well, that was awesome. I was really impressed by your Vim and your typing skills, like command line skills.
Yeah, actually, there was a question about your.
Oh wow!
Yeah, when will you migrate from Tmux to VS Code, Pascal?
Oh, I don't actually think you can compare them because VS Code is an editor and Tmux is a window multiplexer. I don't think I'll do that. So I actually have VS Code installed to like get a feeling for it, but only for our training students because we recommend that editor. I will probably not migrate in the near future, but I'll always take a look at these editors and see the cool features and try to get them in Vim as well.
Just to tease, Okay. Well, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Time to say goodbye.
See you guys.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Get Angular Connect.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. We totally missed that. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So, let's quickly. So next week most of us will be at Angular Connect, and this is this is a conference happening in London,
Yeah.
and there will be a lot of members of the Angular core team. There will be a lot of people from the community. There will be I don't know. There will be a lot of good content around this event that you can check. Please go to Angular Connect in Twitter or in social media. A lot of people just put the content in there. So even if you are not able to join the conference, that's really recommended. And then we will see probably some other content like Angular Air, and there will be like a lot of things going on.
Yep.
So please follow that, and well, we will see each other then. So Pascal and Wasim.
Yep.
See you like in a few days over there.
4 days.
4 days.
The countdown for all the talks and all the content that we want to show. Very good. So bye again. Cool to be sharing this time with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao.